Mr. Michael Steele, former chairman of the Republican National Committee and former lieutenant governor of Maryland and former Democratic governor of the state of Pennsylvania, Ed Rendell. He also served as the mayor of Philly and was the chair of the DNC. I want to start down south with you, Mr. Steele. What's your reaction to Madison Cawthorn conceding?
Well, it's kind of interesting. A couple of things. One, it says to me that Republicans can, if they want to, push back against crazy and push back against those who are outside of the mainstream, if you will, if they want to. Madison obviously turned the corner on them, and this leads me to point number two, that the reality for him was he thought that he had a much longer runway to go out and behave and say things in a way that wouldn't get him in trouble. That's true up until he started telling little dirty secrets inside the party. When he started talking about cocaine parties and orgies, all of a sudden these right, proper, Christian evangelicals got a little bit upset. So the reality for Madison is he bit off a bit more than he could chew. The party came after him. And what the country should take away from that is all the other stuff that they countenance, they don't have to. They can step up and say no to the Trump lie. They can say no to the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the Matt Gaetzes of the party, but they won't. So, they picked their poison, and it was Cawthorn.
Well, it was. Governor Rendell, let's talk about Pennsylvania. Doug Mastriano is now one of two people who could get the job you once held. This is a man who was at the Capitol on January 6th. He continues to be an election denier, pushing the big lie. How high are the stakes for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the birthplace of democracy?
Stakes are enormous. For example, if Mastriano were to become governor, the Republicans will probably hold both houses if they control the legislature. That will mean that Pennsylvania will criminalize abortion, and that will be stunning. The only thing that's going to stop Pennsylvania from criminalizing abortion, with no exception, is Josh Shapiro's election as governor. I am fairly confident that he will get elected. The Republicans did us a great favor. Michael is right. They can get rid of crazy, but they chose to nominate crazy to the most important office in the state of Pennsylvania. And I think Josh Shapiro, who's a terrific candidate, will steamroll the election.
Well, let's bring in one of Pennsylvania's best political reporters, Katie Meyer. She covers politics, power, and elections for WHYY. And fun fact, she was once an intern of our own Steve Kornacki. Katie, what are you hearing about Mastriano's win? What have people around the state been saying about him?
Well, we had a very last-minute attempt by Republican insiders in Pennsylvania to coalesce support around Lou Barletta, who had been trailing Mastriano in the polls. And that really speaks to what Republicans in this state are thinking about. Not necessarily that they can't support Mastriano and his policies. A lot of them, as Governor Rendell mentioned, are kind of within the mainstream of the GOP at this point, like getting rid of abortion, but because they have concerns about whether or not he can beat Josh Shapiro. I'll just say as well, I mean, these were similar concerns to the ones that people had about Donald Trump in 2016, and he went on to beat Hillary Clinton in the general election and in Pennsylvania. So, you never know what's going to happen in these.
True, true. Michael, let's talk about Pennsylvania's Democratic Senate candidates. What is it about John Fetterman that drew in voters, and can he take it to November?
The thing about John Fetterman is he's every man. He's the neighbor next door. He's the guy who helps you bring in the groceries. He's the neighbor you go to when you got a problem. He comes off as this figure that is larger than politics, beyond politics. And it is translated very well for him around the state. He's used his time as lieutenant governor, and I know a little bit of something about that job, very, very well with my governor friend across from me here. But he knows very well how to connect to people, to bring that narrative to the street, if you will. And he's going to benefit, I think, mightily from it this November. The Republicans are going to have a tall order, kind of going after him and trying to create that separation with those voters because he has a built-in relationship that we haven't seen in politics in a long time. And Pennsylvania is a good bellwether, not just for, Republicans to look at and see how they handle something like that, but for Democrats to understand how they can position themselves going forward in upcoming elections.
Governor, what do you think of Fetterman's win? Tough for Republicans to say that Democrats are the party of coastal elites when Fetterman's your guy.
Yeah, very hard. And John Fetterman is a great retail campaigner. We haven't seen a retail campaigner as good as him for at least 20 years. I won't tell you who that was. But in any event, John Fetterman is incredible to small groups, incredible one-on-one. He's honest. Comes across as honest, and he is honest. He tells what's on his mind. He's a very engaging guy. And by the way, the stroke, you'll see John Fetterman a week from now, and you can't believe that man had anything wrong with him. He's really dynamic and a physical presence and a great guy, and he'll bring a lot of those Democratic registered voters, blue-collar voters, back into the fold.
Katie, when you spoke to voters from both parties, what were their biggest concerns? What were they looking for from the candidates? Because on the Republican side, you're looking at Dave McCormick, you're looking at Dr. Oz. Let's be honest, neither of them are Pennsylvania guys. They're certainly not locals.
Sure. And there definitely was a lot of that in the GOP primary when I talked to voters, concerned that they're not really conservatives, that they, kind of carpetbagged in, although, of course, there's a long history of carpetbagging in the U.S. Senate. And so, yeah, absolutely, there is that part of it. I would say, there are some real policy stakes here. As Governor Rendell mentioned, abortion is a big issue for both parties. Democrats are going to turn out on that. Republicans may as well. And I think one of the things that we're seeing among lots of voters on both sides of the aisle is a real anti-establishment spirit. You see this in the GOP primaries. You saw this with the insurgency of Kathy Barnett at the very end, although she, of course, is not going to win the GOP primary there. And I think that is what Fetterman speaks to as well, somebody who has not gotten endorsements from the Democratic establishment, a real sort of alternative for the party.
Michael, none of these candidates, when they were asked by none of these Republican Senate candidates, when they were asked by the Philadelphia Inquirer who won the last presidential election, none of them were willing to answer that question. One of those people is going to be running in the general. What does that say to you about the state of politics in the state of Pennsylvania?
It sucks like it does everywhere else around the country. To be rather blunt about it, it's just the state of our politics has been messed up by the politicians. And quite honestly, a lot of Americans have allowed it to happen, and a lot more participated in getting it to this state. So now the question becomes, as we go into this general election, what kind of country do you want? How do you want it to shape itself on the heels of what happened this past weekend in Buffalo? When you have this rise of white nationalism as a threat, not just to democracy, but to whole communities of people. So I think Pennsylvanians should be asking whoever the Republican nominee is, okay, where do you stand on January 6th? Since you didn't want to answer during the primary, you're going to have to account for it, because whether it's Shapiro or Fetterman, you best believe they're going to be asking the question out loud a lot. And at some point, those Republican nominees are going to have to account to the Pennsylvania voters, just like they're going to have to account at ballot boxes around the country this fall.
Then what do Democrats need to do now to win in November? Governor?
Have to drive turnout. Just continue to tell our voters how important it is. This is not a mid-year election. This is the equivalent of a presidential election. Tell them what the stakes are clearly, and try to get Republicans on record. Try to get, as Michael said, try to get the Republican nominee for the Senate to declare themselves on background checks, on multiple bullet magazines, on assault weapons, things like that, where the tremendous majority of Pennsylvanians want change. Get them on record, because when they go on record, if they're going to try to hold on to their base, they're going to lose independence, and they're going to lose a lot of their own voters. And the key here is, I think whoever wins, McCormick or Oz, is going to try to do what Governor Romney did in 2020.